I discovered the HOA was stealing my well water when my pump started running dry in the middle of winter. And what I found when I investigated made my blood boil hotter than the clubhouse they had secretly been heating with my property for months. My name is Zachary Norwood, and I had owned my 5-acre property in Bellingham, Washington, for 8 years before the Riverside Meadows HOA decided to expand their little kingdom. When I bought the land back in 2017, there was no HOA anywhere near me. I had a main house, a workshop, and my own private well that I had drilled at considerable expense. The well was deep, hitting an excellent aquifer at 200 feet, and it had always provided more than enough water for my needs. Then the developers came in 2022 and built Riverside Meadows, a planned community of cookie-cutter houses that sprawled across what used to be farmland adjacent to my property. I had gotten the usual notices about the development, but since my property was not part of it, I did not pay much attention. I figured they would do their thing and I would do mine. The HOA formed immediately, as these things do, and they elected a board president named Patricia Morrison. Patricia was exactly what you would expect. A 52-year-old woman with an asymmetrical haircut, dyed an unnatural shade of blonde designer athleisure, where that cost more than my monthly grocery bill, and an opinion about absolutely everything. She drove a white Lexus SUV with a bumper sticker that said, "I speak to managers professionally," which she apparently thought was charming rather than a red flag visible from space. For the first year, we coexisted fine. They stayed on their side of the property line, and I stayed on mine. I am a software developer who works remotely, so I was home most of the time, enjoying the peace and quiet of my rural setup. My nearest neighbor in the HOA was about 300 feet away, which was close enough to see their house, but far enough that we did not interact much. Things started getting weird in early 2024. Patricia knocked on my door one February morning, clipboard in hand, with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Good morning, Zachary," she said, acting like we were old friends even though we had spoken maybe twice before. "I wanted to talk to you about a wonderful opportunity." "I'm not interested in joining your HOA," I said immediately. I had dealt with enough HOA horror stories from friends to know where this was going. "Oh no, nothing like that," she laughed, though I could tell the idea had crossed her mind. "We're building a community clubhouse, and we were hoping you might be willing to grant us an easement across the corner of your property. It would really help with the construction access." I looked at the diagram she showed me. The easement she wanted would cut right across my southwest corner, which would interfere with some plans I had for expanding my workshop. "I don't think so," I said. "That's going to be in my way." Her smile tightened. "The HOA would be willing to compensate you, say $500. "Not interested. Sorry. 1,000. It's not about the money. I have plans for that area." Patricia's expression shifted then, just for a moment, and I saw something cold underneath. "Well, that's disappointing. I hope you will reconsider. It would be very neighborly of you." "I appreciate you asking, but no thanks." She left, and I thought that was the end of it. I should have known better. Construction on the clubhouse started in March 2024. I could hear the machinery and see the activity from my property, but it was far enough away that it did not bother me much. They were building it on the far side of their development, or so I thought. Then in June, I started noticing my water pressure was not quite what it used to be. Nothing dramatic, just a slight decrease. I checked my system and everything looked fine, so I figured maybe the water table was a bit lower due to a dry spring. Washington had been having some unusual weather patterns. By September, the clubhouse was complete, and I could see it from my property. A large, modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows, a parking lot, and extensive landscaping. The HOA threw a big grand opening party. I was not invited, which was fine by me. October brought the first real cold snap, and that is when I noticed something strange. My well pump was running more frequently than normal. A lot more. I started monitoring it closely, and the usage numbers did not make sense. I live alone, work from home, and my water usage is pretty consistent. But according to the pump logs, I was suddenly using almost 3 times my normal amount of water. That is when I decided to do some investigating. I followed my property line carefully, checking the ground for any signs of disturbance. What I found on the southwest corner, the same corner where Patricia had wanted that easement, made me see red. Someone had dug under my fence line, going at least 5 feet down, and had tapped directly into my well line. They had done it professionally too, with proper fittings and everything. But they had done it on my property, without my knowledge or permission, and they had covered it up carefully, hoping I would never notice. I followed the underground line with a pipe locator I borrowed from my buddy who does plumbing work. The line ran straight to the new clubhouse. They were using my well water. My water from my well that I had paid $12,000 to drill. They were using it to supply their entire clubhouse, the bathrooms, the kitchen, and as I would soon discover, the heated floors and the hot tub. I sat in my truck at the edge of my property, watching the clubhouse through binoculars as people came and went, using my water while I was paying for the electricity to pump it. The audacity of it was breathtaking. I called Patricia Morrison that evening. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Hello." "Patricia, it's Zachary Norwood. We need to talk." "Oh, hello, Zachary. What can I do for you? You can explain why the HOA tapped into my well without permission." There was a pause, a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, taken on a defensive edge. "I don't know what you are talking about." "Yes, you do. I found the tap. I found the line. It runs straight to your clubhouse. You are stealing my water." That is a very serious accusation. It is a very serious crime. It is theft of services, illegal connection to a private utility, and trespassing. "Do you want me to keep going?" Another pause. Then, "I think there has been a misunderstanding. The HOA hired contractors to handle all the utility connections. If there was an error, I am sure we can work it out." "An error? You dug a trench under my property line and connected to my well line. That is not an error. That is deliberate. I will need to discuss this with the board." "You do that. And while you are at it, you can discuss how you are going to pay me back for the thousands of gallons of water you have stolen and rip out that connection. You have 48 hours. I hung up before she could respond. The next morning, I found a letter in my mailbox. It was from the HOA's lawyer, a guy named Martin Reeves who operated out of a strip mall office in town. The letter claimed that the water rights in the area were communal, that my well was drawing from the same aquifer that served the development, and that I had no right to prevent reasonable use of shared resources. It was complete nonsense, legally speaking, but it told me everything I needed to know. They were not going to back down. I called my own lawyer, a sharp woman named Janet Huang who I had used for my business contracts. She read the letter and actually laughed. "This is garbage," she said. "They have admitted in writing that they are using your well on your property that you paid to drill and maintain. This is open and shut. So what do I do? Document everything. Get photos, measurements, water usage records. Then we file a lawsuit and possibly get the police involved for theft. But the lawsuit is going to take months, maybe over a year. I do not have months. My electric bills have almost tripled from running the pump constantly. I am subsidizing their entire clubhouse." "I understand, but the legal system moves slowly." I thanked her and hung up, but I knew the legal route was not going to solve my immediate problem. I needed something faster. That afternoon, I did more investigating. I rented a backhoe from the equipment rental place and carefully excavated the area around my well line where they had made the connection. I documented everything with photos and video, making sure to get clear shots of how they had tapped in and where the line ran. Then I traced my own well system, from the well head back to my house, identifying every access point. The well itself was in a small pump house about 100 feet from my main house. The setup was straightforward. A submersible pump in the well, a pressure tank, a control system, and the main line that fed my house. The HOA had tapped in between the well and the pressure tank, which meant they were getting water before it even reached my house. No wonder my pressure had dropped. I spent the next week gathering evidence. I set up a trail camera pointed at the clubhouse to document the heavy usage. People were there constantly. Exercise classes, book clubs, kids' activities, and every evening I could see people lounging in the hot tub on the deck. My hot tub, essentially, since I was providing the water to fill it. I also got copies of my electric bills for the past year. The increase was stark. Before the clubhouse opened, my average monthly bill was around $150. After they tapped in, it had jumped to over $400. In the 4 months since they had started stealing my water, I had paid an extra $1,000 in electricity to run a pump that was serving their facility. Janet filed the lawsuit on my behalf, seeking damages, an injunction to disconnect from my well, and legal fees. The HOA was served on November 1st. Patricia Morrison showed up at my door the next day. "This lawsuit is ridiculous," she said, waving the papers at me. "Do you know how much this is going to cost in legal fees for both of us? You should have thought of that before you stole my water. We did not steal anything. There was a mistake with the contractors. Patricia, I have photos of the tap. It is professional work. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. This was not a mistake. The board is prepared to offer you compensation for any water used." "How much?" $500 seems fair. I actually laughed. $500. I have paid over $1,000 in extra electricity alone, not to mention the water itself and the wear on my equipment. And that is just the financial cost. You trespassed on my property and committed theft. We are prepared to go to $1,000. Disconnect from my well, pay me $5,000 for damages, and we can settle this. Her face went red. $5,000, that is outrageous. So is stealing someone's water. Those are my terms. The board will never agree to that. Then I will see you in court, and Patricia. I am also filing a police report for theft of services. Have a nice day." I shut the door on her sputtering protests. An hour later, I drove to the Bellingham Police Department and filed a formal complaint. The officer who took my report, a tired-looking guy named Officer Henderson, listened to my story and looked over my documentation. "This is pretty cut and dried," he said. "They admitted to using your well. Their lawyer sent me a letter claiming they had a right to it. I have it here." He read the letter and shook his head. "Yeah, they do not. This is theft. I will pass this along to the detective unit and someone will follow up with you." "How long will that take?" "Hard to say. Could be a few days, could be a few weeks. We have to build a case." I left the police station feeling slightly better, but I knew the wheels of justice turned slowly. Meanwhile, I was still paying for the HOA to heat their floors and fill their hot tub. November brought serious cold to Washington. We had an early freeze, and temperatures dropped into the 20s at night. My well was deep enough that freezing was not normally an issue, but I noticed the clubhouse had increased their usage even more. When I watched through my binoculars, I realized why. They had radiant floor heating throughout the building, and it ran on hot water from a boiler. My water was being heated and circulated through their floors 24 hours a day. That is when I made my decision. If the law was going to take months, and the HOA was not going to negotiate in good faith, I would solve the problem myself. I waited until late on a Friday night. The clubhouse was closed, the parking lot was empty, and the development was quiet. I went to my pump house with my tools and got to work. The plan was simple. I installed a valve on my side of where the HOA had tapped in. Then I closed that valve, completely cutting off the flow to their illegal connection. They could have their tap, but no water would flow through it. I made sure the valve was secure and locked it with a padlock. Then I drained the section of pipe between the valve and their connection point. It was now late November, and the forecast called for temperatures in the teens. The water in their line would freeze solid within hours. I went back to my house, made myself a cup of coffee, and waited. Saturday morning dawned cold and clear. I was up early and I watched the clubhouse from my window. At 9 in the morning, I saw the first car pull into the parking lot, then another. By 9:30, there were a dozen cars. The HOA had some kind of event scheduled. At 10 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Patricia. "What did you do?" she screeched, not even bothering with a greeting. "Good morning, Patricia. I am not sure what you mean. The clubhouse has no water at all. We have 100 people here for a craft fair and the toilets do not work." "Huh, that is unfortunate. Maybe you should call a plumber." "I know you did something. This is sabotage." "Patricia, I did not touch your plumbing. I made some adjustments to my well system, which is my right since it is my property. What happens on your end is not my problem. You cannot do this." "Actually, I can. You should not have been stealing my water in the first place." She made a sound like a strangled cat and hung up. I watched as people started leaving the clubhouse, clearly being told the facilities were not available. The parking lot emptied out within 30 minutes, but that was just the beginning. The real problem for the HOA was the heating. The radiant floor heating system required constant water circulation. Without water flow, the pipes would freeze, and once they froze, they would burst. The boiler itself would shut down without water, which meant the entire building would lose heat. I almost felt bad. Almost. By Sunday evening, I could tell they had figured out the extent of the problem. There were trucks in the parking lot, and I could see people in winter coats walking around the building. The temperature had dropped to 15 degrees overnight, and I was willing to bet the pipes in that clubhouse were frozen solid. Monday morning brought another visit from Patricia. This time she had 2 men with her. One I recognized as Tom Hendricks, another board member, and someone I did not know. "Mr. Norwood," the unknown man said. He was in his 60s, wearing an expensive suit under his winter coat. "My name is Richard Carlson. I am the chairman of the HOA board." "Nice to meet you. We seem to have a problem." "You do," I agreed. "I heard your clubhouse is having issues. You shut off our water supply." "I shut off my water supply to an illegal tap on my property. What you did with your plumbing is your problem." Tom Hendricks spoke up. He was a stocky guy in his 40s with a red face that got redder as he talked. "You have caused thousands of dollars in damage. The pipes have burst throughout the building. The boiler is damaged. You are going to pay for this." "No, I am not. You stole my water." "I stopped you from stealing my water. Any damage you suffered is the result of your own illegal actions." "We will sue you," Patricia said. "Get in line, I have already sued you." Richard held up a hand. "Everyone calm down. Mr. Norwood, we understand there has been a misunderstanding. The board is willing to make this right. We will pay for the water we used and make sure the connection is done properly with your permission." "No, no, no. There will be no connection. You will remove the tap, restore my property to its original condition, and pay me for damages. Those are the only terms. Be reasonable, Richard said. We have already built the clubhouse with this water connection. The cost to bring in a new water line would be enormous. We would have to dig up the street, connect to the county line, pay for meters and permits. We are talking over $100,000. Should have thought of that before you stole my water. Tom stepped forward aggressively. Listen, you little. Richard pulled him back. Tom, not helping. He turned back to me. Mr. Norwood, the HOA is prepared to offer you a fair price for an easement and continued water access. We will pay for the electricity, pay for a new upgraded well system if needed, and provide you with $10,000 for the easement itself. That is more than fair. It was actually a decent offer, but I was way past the point of caring. Not interested. Why are you being so stubborn about this? Because you did not ask. You did not negotiate, you just took. You trespassed, you stole, and when I caught you, you tried to intimidate me with lawyer letters and threats. Now you have consequences and you do not like it. Tough. Patricia's voice was shrill. You are being vindictive. No, I am being protective of my property. There is a difference. We will make sure you are held responsible for every penny of damage, she said. Looking forward to your lawyer trying to argue that in court. Pretty sure the judge is going to ask why you were using my water without permission in the first place. They left, and I could hear Patricia yelling at the two men as they walked back to their cars. I watched them drive away and allowed myself a small smile. It was not a nice thing I had done, letting their pipes freeze. But nice had not worked. Asking them to stop had not worked. Legal action was taking too long. Sometimes you had to fight fire with fire. The next few weeks were interesting. The HOA hired lawyers as promised. I got a demand letter claiming I was liable for the damages to the clubhouse, which they estimated at $35,000. Burst pipes throughout the building, a damaged boiler, water damage to the floors and walls, and the cost of emergency repairs. They wanted me to pay for all of it. Janet had a field day with that letter. She sent back a response that was basically a legal version of "go pound sand," pointing out that the HOA had admitted to using my well without permission, that I had every right to control access to my own property, and that they were lucky I was not seeking criminal prosecution more aggressively. The detective assigned to my theft complaint, a sharp woman named Detective Sarah Chen, came by to interview me in early December. I showed her everything: the tap, the documentation, the photos, the water usage records, the electric bills, the lawyer letters where the HOA had effectively admitted what they had done. This is pretty clear-cut, she said. They stole your water, you caught them, and you shut them off. The fact that their system got damaged is on them. That is what I figured. However, she continued, I have to ask, did you know their pipes would freeze and burst when you shut off the water? I met her eyes. I knew it was a possibility, but I did not go onto their property. I did not touch their plumbing. I simply stopped letting them steal from me. What happened after that was a consequence of their own actions. She nodded slowly. Okay, I will be honest with you, Mr. Norwood. This is going to be complicated. Yes, they stole your water. But the DA is going to look at this and see two parties in a civil dispute where one party took actions that resulted in significant property damage. They might decide to let you two fight it out in civil court rather than pursue criminal charges, even though they committed theft. Theft of services cases are hard to prosecute. We have to prove intent, value, all sorts of things. And the defense will argue it was a contractor error, a misunderstanding, whatever. Plus, the HOA has money for good lawyers, so they get away with it. I did not say that. I am going to submit the case to the DA, but you should be prepared for the possibility that this stays in civil court." She was right. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the DA's office. They had reviewed the case and decided not to pursue criminal charges at this time. They felt it was a civil matter better resolved through the ongoing lawsuit. It was frustrating but not unexpected. The civil lawsuit, meanwhile, was moving forward at the speed of molasses. We were in the discovery phase, where both sides exchanged documents and information. The HOA provided records showing they had paid their contractor, a company called Riverside Utilities LLC, to handle all the connections for the clubhouse. They claimed they had assumed the contractor had obtained all necessary easements and permissions. Janet found the problem with that story pretty quickly. The owner of Riverside Utilities LLC was Patricia Morrison's brother-in-law, a guy named Dale Morrison. It was not even a real utilities company. It was a shell corporation set up specifically for this project. "This is fraud," Janet told me over the phone. "They created a fake company to do the work so they could claim ignorance later, but Patricia had to know her own brother-in-law was doing the work. She had to know they did not have permission to tap into your well." "Can we use this?" "Absolutely." This goes from simple theft to conspiracy and fraud. I am amending our complaint. Things got more interesting in January. The clubhouse had been closed since November, and the HOA had been scrambling to get it repaired. But they had a problem. They still did not have a legitimate water source. They had gotten quotes for connecting to the county water line, and as Richard had mentioned, it was expensive. The estimates I heard through the grapevine were around $120,000. The HOA did not have that kind of money in their reserves. They had spent most of their budget building the clubhouse in the first place. So they did what HOAs always do. They assessed the homeowners. Each house in Riverside Meadows got hit with a special assessment of $2,000 to cover the water line connection and the repairs to the clubhouse. The homeowners were not happy. I started hearing through various sources that there was a revolt brewing in the development. People were asking questions about why the clubhouse did not have water, how this situation had happened, and why they were being charged for it. Someone leaked the story to the local newspaper, the Bellingham Herald. A reporter named Kevin Martinez called me for an interview. I was hesitant at first, but Janet said it might actually help our case, so I agreed. The story ran in late January. Local man claims HOA stole his water for clubhouse. It was pretty fair, actually. Kevin laid out both sides, included comments from the HOA, which were predictably defensive and blame-shifting, and included quotes from several Riverside Meadows homeowners who were upset about the special assessment. The story got picked up by some regional news outlets, and then by a few national blogs that focused on HOA horror stories. Suddenly, my situation was getting attention I had not expected. I got calls from other news outlets, from lawyers wanting to represent me, I stayed with Janet, and from people who had similar stories about their HOAs. It was overwhelming but also validating. I was not crazy for being angry about this. The publicity had an interesting effect on the HOA. At their February board meeting, which I heard about from sympathetic homeowners, there was a motion to remove Patricia Morrison as president. The vote was close, but she survived it. However, 3 board members resigned, including Tom Hendricks. The HOA was in chaos. In March, we finally had our first real settlement conference. Both sides, our lawyers, and a mediator sat down in a conference room to try to work out a deal. The HOA's position had softened considerably. They were now offering to pay me $15,000 in damages, cover all legal fees, and remove the tap from my well. In exchange, I would agree not to pursue any further action and sign a mutual non-disparagement agreement. Janet and I caucused in a separate room. "It is a decent offer," she said. "You would get your legal fees covered, which is big, and 15,000 is not nothing." "But," I said, sensing her hesitation, "but I think we can get more. Their position is weak. We have evidence of fraud with the shell company. We have documentation of the theft, and they are under pressure from their own homeowners. I think they will go higher. Let us find out." We countered with 30,000 in damages plus legal fees. The HOA came back with 20,000. We settled at $25,000 plus all legal fees, removal of the tap, restoration of my property, and a written apology. No non-disparagement agreement. The check came in April. $25,000 plus another $8,000 for Janet's fees. I watched from my property as a crew came and carefully removed the illegal tap from my well line, restored the area, and made everything right. It was satisfying in a way that is hard to describe, but the story was not quite over. In May, I got a call from Detective Chen. "Mr. Norwood, I wanted to let you know that we are reopening the criminal investigation." "Why? I thought the DA passed on it." "They did, initially, but some new information came to light. We have been looking into that company, Riverside Utilities LLC. Turns out they did similar illegal taps on 2 other properties in the area for different projects. We are building a fraud case. Against the company or against Patricia Morrison? Both, potentially. If we can prove she knew the taps were illegal, which seems likely given one of the victims has a paper trail of him refusing an easement before the tap happened, we can charge her personally. What happens then? That depends on a lot of factors, but at minimum, fraud charges. Possibly theft, conspiracy, trespassing. The company will definitely face charges." I thanked her and hung up, feeling a sense of justice finally catching up. The legal system was slow, but it was working. By June, the story got more interesting. Patricia Morrison was arrested along with her brother-in-law Dale. The charges included fraud, theft of services, and conspiracy. The story made the local news again, and I got more calls from reporters. The trial did not happen until October. I was called as a witness, and I testified about everything: finding the tap, the confrontations with Patricia, the documentation I had gathered. Other victims testified too. The case against them was overwhelming. Patricia Morrison was convicted on all counts in November. She was sentenced to 18 months in prison, though the judge agreed to work release and probation. Her brother-in-law Dale got 2 years. Both were ordered to pay restitution to all the victims. I would be getting an additional $12,000 from the criminal case, covering things the civil settlement had not. The Riverside Meadows HOA was completely restructured. Patricia was obviously removed from the board. New elections were held, and a group of reformers took over. They actually did a decent job. One of them, a retired teacher named Gloria Stevens, came by to apologize in person for what had happened. "We did not know what she was doing," Gloria told me. "Most of us did not. We trusted that the board was handling things properly, and we did not ask enough questions. That is on us." "I appreciate that," I said, and I meant it. The fight had never been with the ordinary homeowners, just with the people who thought they could take whatever they wanted. As for the clubhouse, they eventually got it connected to the county water line. It cost the HOA nearly $140,000 when all was said and done, money that came from a combination of the special assessment, a loan, and increased monthly dues. The clubhouse reopened in July, and from what I heard, it was used more carefully now. People remembered what had happened and why. I used some of the settlement money to upgrade my own well system. I installed a better pump, improved the pressure tank, and added some monitoring equipment so I would know immediately if there were any unusual usage patterns. I also put in security cameras covering the well head and the property lines. I was not getting caught off guard again. The rest of the money went into savings and some improvements to my workshop. I built the expansion I had always wanted, right in that southwest corner where Patricia had wanted her easement. Every time I walked into that new space, I felt a small sense of satisfaction. Life returned to normal, more or less. I continued working from home, enjoying my property and mostly ignoring the HOA development next door. Occasionally, I would see one of the homeowners at the local hardware store or coffee shop, and we would nod at each other. No hard feelings. They had not been the problem. One warm evening in late summer, I was sitting on my back deck, drinking a beer and watching the sunset over the mountains. My well pump kicked on for my evening shower, running smoothly and efficiently. My water, pumping through my system for my use. I thought about the whole crazy situation. If Patricia had just asked, had just offered to pay for an easement and compensate me fairly from the start, I probably would have said yes. A few $100s a month for water access, a proper legal agreement, everything above board. I am a reasonable person, and it would have been easy money, but that is not how bullies work. They take first and apologize later, if at all. They assume they can intimidate or outlast opposition. Patricia had thought she could steal my water, and when caught, thought she could bluff her way out of it with lawyer letters and threats. She had been wrong. The experience taught me something important about standing up for yourself. Sometimes being nice does not work. Sometimes you have to be willing to fight, to make things uncomfortable, to let consequences happen. I had not done anything illegal. I had simply stopped allowing myself to be victimized. Did I feel bad about the pipes freezing? A little. It was destructive, and it caused problems for people beyond just Patricia. But I also knew that without that dramatic consequence, the HOA would have dragged things out forever, kept using my water, and found ways to avoid real accountability. Sometimes you have to make a point that cannot be ignored. As I sat there in the fading light, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Janet. Restitution check from Morrison cleared. $12,000 is in your account. Congrats on finally closing this chapter. I smiled and typed back. Thanks for everything. Could not have done it without you. Another buzz. You did the hard part. Most people would have just let them get away with it. She was right. Most people would have given up, would have decided the fight was not worth it, would have let the HOA steamroll them. I had almost been one of those people. It would have been easier to just accept their initial lowball offer, to move on and forget about it. But this was about more than money. It was about principle. It was about drawing a line and saying no when someone tries to take what is yours. The lawsuit, the frozen pipes, the criminal charges, all of it had come from that simple decision to stand my ground. Patricia Morrison was in prison now, paying for her crimes. The HOA had learned an expensive lesson about respecting property rights, and I had my peace and quiet back. I finished my beer and went inside. Tomorrow was another day of work, and I had a deadline approaching. Life went on. But sometimes, late at night when I heard my well pump kick on, I would smile a little. My water, my well, my property, and nobody was going to take it from me ever again. The whole experience became something of a legend in Bellingham. People would point out my property to newcomers and tell them the story, usually with some embellishments. I became that guy who let the HOA's pipes freeze in local lore. Some people thought I was a hero. Others thought I had been too harsh. I did not care much about either assessment. I had done what I needed to do to protect what was mine. In December, almost exactly 2 years after I had first shut off the water, I got a Christmas card from Gloria Stevens, the new HOA president. Inside was a simple message. "Thank you for teaching us to do better. Happy holidays." I put it on my fridge, a reminder that sometimes conflict leads to growth. The HOA was better now than it had been under Patricia. They followed rules, respected boundaries, and operated transparently. They had needed a wake-up call, and apparently, frozen pipes in December were one hell of an alarm. As winter settled in again and snow began to fall on my property, I made my evening rounds, checking that everything was secure. The well house was warm and functioning perfectly. The new cameras were recording. My property was safe. I went to bed that night feeling truly settled for the first time in 2 years. The fight was over. Justice had been served. And when spring came, I would start planning my next project, because that is what you do when you win. You move forward, you build, you create. You do not let the bullies define your story, you write your own ending.